We're live. People, deluded. I'm back again. I've got a special guest. He's my friend for now. Come the weekend, I might hate him depending on the result. I've got Dan, as he likes to be referred to, or better yet, son of Chelsea. How you doing, my guy, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. Interesting to talk about this game. I feel it's always a big game, Chelsea versus Arsenal. So interesting discussion, and fingers crossed on Saturday, Chelsea get a decent result.
I don't know for fingers crossed, but yeah, man, fingers crossed in an Arsenal perspective. Please make sure you're hitting the like button. Before we get into it, let them know a bit about yourself and what son of Chelsea is and the sort of things you like to do, man.
Yeah, I mean, I set up the channel just before we came in. I was speaking about it. I set up the channel about 2014, but I restarted it after like a 3-year break last year, summer 2019, and pretty much at this point, it's daily videos surrounding Chelsea. I'm sure like similar stuff to the type of stuff you do on your channel, news, reviews, previews, collabs with other Chelsea creators. As it says on my channel, I'm no rants or no hyperbole. Just Chelsea. I try and give a rational perspective and try and give sort of a calm, reasoned sort of analysis of football, because that's the way I like to talk about football. So if Arsenal fans are interested, even if it is Chelsea related content, that's sort of what I do on my channel. So even though it's been a difficult year for other reasons, I think, the channel, it's been really humbling to see the way it's grown. So it's definitely a big thing and a pleasure to be able to speak about Chelsea on a daily basis.
I respect that, man. People, I think, forgive me if I'm wrong, you're approaching around 20,000 subscribers, right? Or along those lines?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's get the subscribers up, people. Come on, man.
I think. So, yeah.
What you say?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, 18.5 is sort of we're close to 18.5 at this point. 20K hopefully in 2021. It's been incredible because just before lockdown I was under 5K subs. So
crazy, bro.
It's been quite a big year for the channel.
Come on, man. People, I hear what he's saying about 2021. I think he's being a bit too humble. Let's try and get that one done for him before the end of the year. Come on, people. It doesn't cost anything to like this video. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, especially to good quality content. Rather a sad question, because I don't understand how you reach that conclusion. But what made you a Chelsea fan?
My family, basically. Chelsea at my local club, and basically generations of fans supporting Chelsea in my family. It goes back a long way. There was no other club I was supporting. Basically, I think I would have been excommunicated from my family if I would have chosen another club. It's sort of in the blood and the tradition of the family. Basically, my family grew up in Chelsea, working class Chelsea. When I say that, people think I grew up in sort of like my family grew up in mansions, like grew up in Chelsea before it became like the place it is now, So and Chelsea as a club, my granddad was going to see Chelsea, across Europe, watching us against Real Madrid in like the 70s and 80s. Wow. So it's been a big part of the family. We're season ticket holders, and that's sort of the way I found Chelsea. I mean, I'm very lucky in my age that I started supporting the club when Roman took over. That's not because I even knew who Roman was. I just, based on my age, I was very lucky that I came in to support Chelsea when we came into our best sort of period under Abramovich and all the success since then. But yeah, it's been a long part of our family, to be honest. So yeah, that's why I support Chelsea.
And a rather selfish question. I know we're speaking about it off air, but like the journey on YouTube, I always find that very interesting. What was that sort of like? How did you get into making YouTube? What made you actually want to upload content and take it?
Well, I was sort of just bored. I think the original part of it was in sort of 2014. I sort of saw the YouTube football scene was starting to grow a little bit, and there was very few Chelsea creators at the time. When I set up my channel, I was like one of 2 other main channels I knew that spoke about Chelsea at the time. It was a really small sort of community on YouTube. I mean, it's massive now. There's so many Chelsea creators, but back then there was only Eunice who's still going, and another guy called Jonah Zeka, and I collabed with them, and that's how I sort of got going. And then I became part of a channel called 100% Chelsea, and was sort of involved with them for a time. And I think I got a little bit, it was a mixture of going to uni and wanted to pursue that, but also just I got a little bit frustrated with YouTube and sort of the mindset behind it. And then similar way I came back to it was believing that the type of content I enjoyed wasn't really being given at the time, and that sort of was the motivation to return and do it again. So I think for me, it's more of I love football. It's supporting Chelsea. I'm sure, like, just for you, supporting Arsenal is a religion. It's such a big part of your life. You speak about it on a daily basis. So in some ways, it's a bit of therapy, even though sometimes, as recently, you're talking about us losing, and it can be a bit frustrating. But I love speaking about Chelsea, and I love sharing my passion for Chelsea with people, and I hope that comes across on camera. I try and be as unbiased, even though I am a Chelsea fan, and I try and be as respectful in my opinions as possible.
I appreciate that. You can definitely sense the love you have of Chelsea, and it's lovely to have you sat here speaking, because I know we support different clubs, but I get the vibe that first and foremost you're a fan of the game, you love the game and everything else. So I've got a lot of time for you. Let's jump into Arsenal versus Chelsea though. Slightly before we talk about that, how's the season gone from a Chelsea perspective? Because I mean, I can look, but like I said, I'm not a Chelsea fan. You're living and breathing this season, the ups and downs. What sort of journey have you guys gone on? What sort of things have been happening?
Yeah, I think you have to say reasonably well. I think that those two recent defeats to Everton and Wolves really knocked us back. And I think that there may be a sense of people being a little bit doom and gloom about things. And then, of course, we win the other night. I think you have to be pleased with the way things have gone from a Chelsea perspective. I think in terms of the integration of a lot of the new players, the majority of them have worked really well in the team. Frank Lampard really settling now on a main formation. That wasn't really a thing we had last year. It's very much the 4-3-3 now. Seeing Kante come back to best fitness. Mason Mount's been one of our best players. Reece James, Ben Chilwell, Thiago Silva, Kurt Zuma. There's a lot of big performers in the team this year. And I think just there's a lot more belief and confidence about this Chelsea side than there was last year. We're still a growing side. We're still a side that can have bad moments within games. This is not the finished article. I almost look at this season as like the Frank's first season in a sense, because last year, with the transfer ban, young players, there was a lot of problems last year, and now Frank has a lot of his own players that he's brought over the summer. It's I think the way getting Champions League football was massive for the club last year, and I think that now moving forward you want to sort of see that growth. And for me, the big part this year is just trying to close that gap on Liverpool. Even if Liverpool look amazing at the moment, they could still run away with it, but not to like 20 to 30 points. We need to close it to hopefully under 10, and that for me would be seen as improvement.
Quote unquote respectable sort of distance sort of thing. What would you say are the areas you still want to be seeing an improvement in? Any potential areas of concern or weakness either in Frank Lampard's management or the way the team's playing?
I think there's always going to be this understanding and appreciation that, a bit like Arteta, Lampard's still a very young manager, so he's going to be learning on the job. I think that last season, if you were pro Lampard or sort of you felt he had a big future at Chelsea, there was enough evidence to give you sort of that, impression. But if you were on the other side and felt, there could be some issues further down the line, I felt there was enough there last season to give you that impression as well. I think this year, I've seen a lot more game intelligence and sort of management within games a lot better, in terms of us being a lot more sort of picking our moments. Last year we were a lot more of an erratic team. I think if you're an Arsenal fan looking for hope, I think you'd look at parts of the West Ham performance where we dropped off a little bit. There is still a sense this young Chelsea side, when we're on top, I think we're quite a hard team to stop scoring. But when the game turns, I still concerned about this Chelsea team in their sense of their game management. I think we saw that recently against Wolves, and the second half was probably the worst half of football I've seen from Chelsea so far this season, in terms of being 1-0 up, letting the game slip. And there is some concern still of maybe injuries to key players going into this game that I think could hurt Chelsea in defence and attack. So there's certain things like that. I think that I'm a lot more encouraged by what I've seen from Chelsea this year. I think that we have the ability overall, despite recent defeats, to manage situations a lot better. And I think there are certain key individuals that I think have really helped that this year.
Definitely, you took the words out of my mouth, and it's refreshing that obviously as an outsider looking at Chelsea's situation, some of what I think has been echoed. Make sure you're hitting the like button, people. You mentioned, you kind of jumped the gun, you mentioned players missing sort of thing. Apparently, I've quickly just browsed over Lampard's press conference. Apparently Reece James is missing, Chilwell could be missing, and Ziyech is going to be missing. Now again, this could be managers being coy, I don't know, but surely that's a bitter blow. How does that make you feel going into a game like this? To be fair, you don't need them to beat us the way we've been playing, but yeah.
They're three key players for Chelsea, they really are. I mean, the fullback play is such a big part of the way Lampard sets up his team. And Ben Chilwell and Reece James have been two of Chelsea's best performers so far this season. They've been so integral to the way we attack, especially we use width to try and attack opposing teams, and Ben has fit in so well. He looks like a player who's been at Chelsea for a number of years, not just that this is his first season. And Reece James has been incredible. I mean, I think that there's a lot of Chelsea fans, if you speak to them, who would say that Reece James has been Chelsea's best player. I mean, he's come on leaps and bounds, especially defensively, but I'm sure, as people who watch him from a distance will see his crossing ability, and it's just wonderful, to have that ability on the right. And Ziyech has been, out of all of the new signings, I think, Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, and Ziyech, I think when you look at attacking signings rather than defensive signings, he's been the most impactful. What he's able to do on that left foot, I mean, I think that's a big help for Arsenal, because creatively he just opens up the pitch for Chelsea and gives us so many options. And it's a shame he's not going to be fit. We do have other players coming back into form that I'm optimistic about, but yeah, those are going to be big misses. He did say doubtful. He said Ziyech is definitely out, but he said doubtful for Reece James and Ben Chilwell. James missed the West Ham game over this sort of fear about this knee injury that he could have had surgery for. It's just a precaution. So fingers crossed, at least one of them could be available. But if both of them are out, it's definitely going to hurt us.
All right, everyone in the comments, I see Turkish has sent his army. I appreciate that, Turkish, and big up everyone. Please make sure you're hitting the like button. Please make sure you're subscribing to my guy, Son of Chelsea. I want to see 20,000 subscribers on him by the end of the year. You mentioned missing players, and for me, I'm getting nightmares. I hope to God Reece James and Chilwell ain't there, purely because my team cannot defend crosses. You've got, fair enough, it's probably more so going to be from dead ball situations, but you've got Zuma. The man's the way he leaps in the air, knowing us, will probably make our shortest player mark him. When I look at that, when I look at the way you play football, on your day you can present issues. It's almost weird in that I'm not shocked that we lose. I'm not confident of a victory, but I'm not scared of playing Chelsea in a nice way. Not that I'm not fearful of their players, in the sense of when we play Chelsea, it's become a running theme now. It's like, we'll attack a bit, you'll attack a bit. You play well, but I just think we shoot ourselves in the foot. Away from how good you lot play, we shoot ourselves in the foot. You look at the game where, Arsenal fans celebrated like a victory when Martinelli scored. I believe it was Mustafi and somebody else. Arteta's first game at the Emirates, we actually played quite well against you lot, but it doesn't matter for playing quite well. You threw it away in the last 15 minutes with Tammy Abraham, and it could have been Jorginho or Aspilicueta. I'm not too sure which one of those it was. So I do think both teams will have a lot of possession. I do think Chelsea can hurt us. I do expect you lot to win. But for me, I'm looking for confidence, and I don't know if it's going to happen, because I haven't seen my team display it against Spurs. I haven't seen my team do it yesterday in the quarterfinal. So if you can't be up for a derby against a North London derby, how are you going to be up for a London derby against Chelsea? I can't really see it. Is there any areas or potential threats you consider at Arsenal? Because again, football matches aren't won on paper. I know you're not a fan of complacency. Is there any areas you're looking at despite our poor form?
I think three players in particular, depending on fitness. I think you've got to look at Aubameyang. I think Aubameyang for me is that one player. I know he's had a difficult season, but as Chelsea know from the FA Cup final, he's a quality finisher. He really is, and he's that one player that can make something happen. And it does feel like this Arteta's, Arsenal is very reliant on Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang to get the goals. He's the one player that can unlock the door sometimes, especially on that left side. Kieran Tierney, I think I look at as a player, especially out wide on the left, especially with Reece James potentially not being there. I feel that's a player that could potentially, especially against Aspilicueta, is most likely going to be on that right side, could potentially get in behind. And Saka is another player that really excites me. I think he's got that sort of directness and that mobility to really hurt teams. Maitland-Niles as well, another player that really surprises me that he doesn't play enough for you guys, especially in central positions. I mean, in terms of a penalty taker, I haven't seen a cooler one in terms of the penalties I've seen Maitland-Niles take. He's taken some incredible penalties, but for the most part, he's a player that you were apparently willing to let go at one point over the summer.
Yeah, he wanted to leave. We brought Cedric in and he's changed his mind. So again, it's Arsenal being reactionary, man.
It stuns me that he doesn't play more. And there's a few of those type of players around Arteta's squad that I just think, especially the way the season's gone, he doesn't integrate more, because I think that there's a real opportunity now for Arsenal to sort of rip everything up basically and go again, a bit like Chelsea in a sense of what we did under Lampard with bringing in young players. I'm not sure all of them maybe are ready for Premier League quality, but those are a couple there. I think the likes of Tierney, I felt Gabriel Magalhaes was a player that Chelsea were linked with last year. I think could be a really big defender. I don't know why Saliba's not playing more for you guys or playing at all for you.
Wish I had an answer for you, bro.
Yeah, Saka is I think a really exciting player for the future. I think he'll be one that I think you'll see more and more get into into the first team at Arsenal. Right? He's one that does. He's going to be a threat that Chelsea have to sort of snuff out on Saturday, in my opinion.
When I look at Chelsea, I get a bit jealous because away from ability and high quality players and all of that sort of stuff, I see a leader. I see you either get free transfers like Willian, thanks for that again, mate, or you get people like Thiago Silva. And a lot of people spoke about his lack of pace and all of this. All of this could have been fair facts, but what I like about Lampard is you lot have brought in a player who he might have deficiencies with his age, but you found the way to mask it, and that is by no means downplaying his ability. And for me, I see a leader in that aspect. What's it been like with Thiago Silva? How did you feel before you signed him and now?
I felt at the time it came out of nowhere, that signing, because it was the one area that Chelsea hadn't really properly invested in that we needed to, and sort of the long-term options, the sort of the 24, 25-year-olds that we could have bought weren't really available this summer. There weren't many options. I know everyone says Upamecano from RB Leipzig, but I felt that was always going to be unlikely, especially with the amount we were investing in further up the pitch. And Thiago just became available. And at the time, I don't think there was any doubt from me or a lot of Chelsea fans about the pedigree of this player. I think the concern was his coming into the league at that age, of the intensity, especially the type of football Chelsea play. We still want to be a progressive team. And it's incredible. It has the transformation. It's not only the impact Thiago Silva individually has had performance-wise, because he's such a class player. I mean, I think these sort of discussions can become a bit reductive and simplistic, but I think that he is, for me, a world-class defender. I think, if you look at the centre-backs in the Premier League, it's amazing. Chelsea have gone from having one of the worst defences, or at least one of the best defenders in the league, basically, especially with Van Dijk being out at the moment. He's been incredible. But also the impact Thiago Silva has had on the games of fellow defenders at Chelsea. Kurt Zouma's just gone up another level this year. He really has. Those two next to him now. They have found such a brilliant partnership. And last year, the big problem for Chelsea was you could never name the best partnership. Frank Lampard as Chelsea fans, we'd go, okay, this is the partnership. And then like 2 games later, Frank would change it again. And we'd be like, okay, this is the partnership. Now it's so settled. We know it's Thiago Silva. We know it's Kurt Zouma. And Thiago, there's a calmness, there's a coolness to him. There's a sense of, he's not he's dominant in what he does, but he's not an aggressive defender, if that makes sense. He's not one of those guys that's flying into challenges. Everything he does is just so sort of calculated. Effective. Calculated. He seems to be ahead of the game. And just for me as a Chelsea fan, it's like having not prime JT back, but, John Terry in sort of 2014-15, where he was still at the, peak of his powers, basically, back in that defense. And that's what Chelsea have needed. We needed someone. We don't have any, I wouldn't say we have any awful defenders. We had centre-backs who were all sort of second choice centre-backs, and they needed a leader next to them. Yeah, like Zouma, Christensen, Rudiger, Tomori even. And we have that now in Silva, and he's been amazing. And when he's on the pitch at the moment, you feel a lot more sort of assured that we can get a big result.
And I definitely feel that. I think he started off a bit slow. I remember, was it an own goal or not or a mistake or something against someone you played? But he's come a long way, and I'm jealous, like I said. You mentioned something there, but before I get into that, you've got a question. Big up South London's finest. Please make sure you're hitting the like button. He said, son of Chelsea, or we could just call him Dan. Why is Callum Hudson-Odoi being frozen now? Known about him since secondary school. He was special. Yeah, it looks a bit weird to the outside, because it's almost like Chelsea begged him to stay. He signed a big deal. He has got a good future and he has got a lot of ability, but one reason or not, he's not playing. And I would have thought he would have been someone we're talking about going into the Euros.
Yeah, I think that the issue with Callum is, I think context is quite relevant here. We've just bought Hakim Ziyech, and until he got injured, he was sort of a main player within the first team. That's been an issue for Callum. The issue is injury problems as well. He's got injured a few times at key points. Ziyech went down with an injury against Leeds, and I felt, okay, this is the time Callum's going to break into the first team. And then literally a day later, he got another injury. He's just returning from an injury now.
Such a shame.
So he struggled with, he got that Achilles injury under Sarri. And it's such a sort of defining moment, I think. And I hope it isn't in a bad way. He's still a very young player. He's still got bags of talent. I feel he could even feature against Arsenal, because we don't have Ziyech as a wide player. I think he's a big player, and he can be. Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about Callum is he's taken the opportunities that he's been given by Lampard this season in Champions League group games. He scored against Krasnodar. He scored against Rennes. He had a good game against Sevilla. So it's not like anything within personally, like what Callum's doing, I feel when he's got those opportunities, he's taken them. The issue is this season, as I'm sure maybe we'll come to, the strength in depth at Chelsea, especially in attacking areas, is so deep that it's difficult. Callum will have a good game in midweek, but then we come to a Premier League game and Hakim Ziyech is starting, and then he has a blinder, at least when he was fit. And it's hard then to, as I think a coach, to go to look at Lampard. I think not outsiders, but I think some people really go in on Lampard for not playing Callum, but I think sometimes that misses the context of other players' performances. If the team's winning in the Premier League and Callum isn't playing, it's very hard for a player to go into the manager and say, why aren't you playing me? I think I have a lot more sympathy for it. It's nothing against Callum. I think we forget sometimes how young some of these players are. But as those Bayern Munich links continue to come up, there's always going to be that concern he could be moving away. I just hope he maybe gets an opportunity soon and takes it in the Premier League, because I think with injuries to other players, he could have a chance.
I think he could be a very good player for Chelsea. I've seen him run rings around Arsenal's players a lot. I've known about him for a while, and he's a talented boy. I think there's two sides to the story. On one hand, I think he can count himself hard done by for not getting opportunities, and maybe the clubs beg me to stay, I'm not getting any. But on the other hand, as fickle as it is, and young players do need a chance and stuff, you've got to take chances. And I feel he's played well in patches, and I also feel he's been a bit shaky in others. And that's the reality of the football, Callum Hudson-Odoi, you're in that first team because you've got ability. You've mentioned Ziyech. There's a whole bound of players playing consistently. And again, I'm an outsider, but I remember, because fans did it with Reece Nelson, they did it with Joe Willett, they're still doing it. I remember, what was it, last year, there was a mad campaign from Chelsea fans in my circle to play him, and people are seeing online to play him. I think he started against Liverpool and he had a shaky game, and not all Chelsea fans, and this is a criticism on all football fans, but people bang on for players to play. The minute they step in and they have a poor game, that same energy goes in a negative way, when in a nice way, you don't know what you're going to get for 10 games from Callum. He's still developing. I still think he's got a lot of potential. If I had to look at you Chelsea players in terms of the youth, I'm most jealous of Reece James. I think people forget that man can play in midfield. He probably isn't going to play there in the immediate future, but he's been extremely consistent. But one that's been frozen out, and until I heard you just say him, I forgot about him completely. What's happened with Tomori? He was Lampard's guy at Derby. He didn't get a loan spell. He's still there. Like, what's going on there?
It's an absolute mystery. It really is. Because I think the issue with Tomori was that Antonio Rudiger came back from injury last season, and before Rudiger returned from injury, I think a lot of us, including myself, felt Rudiger was Chelsea's best defender. So there was a lot of hope when Rudiger came back, the defensive issues we were having, that Rudiger would come back in, slot in. I think Tomori got injured. It's like Hudson-Odoi. He got injured at a bad time, I think over the Christmas period. And that then froze him out a little bit. And then he returned for a game against Bournemouth, I think in February last season. And it was awful. Chelsea drew the game 2-2, but we were awful defensively. And I think it was at that point that Frank maybe looked at him and felt, okay, I'm not going to trust you in my back three at the time, or back four. And then we, of course, had lockdown, and he got injured just before we returned for Project Restart again. And he basically wasn't fit for the rest of the season. This year, he broke into the team. Christensen got a red card against Liverpool and he started. And I felt, here we go again, because Tomori, funny connection with Arsenal. Tomori originally broke in at Chelsea because David Luiz left for Arsenal. David Luiz leaving for Arsenal on the final day basically opened up the door for Fikayo Tomori and allowed him to get into the team. And you felt like something similar was happening this year at the start of it. But then I think Thiago Silva, a bit like context with Callum Hudson-Odoi, Thiago Silva comes into the team. He forms a good partnership with Kurt Zuma. What are you going to do? What do I think you can't have a go at Lampard and say he's got to change things. Something's working. Our defense has improved this year. So, but I don't know what's happened with him. I think he desperately needs a loan, because he was about to go out on loan to West Ham on deadline day. That didn't happen. He needs a loan absolutely in January. He's one of those players not even on the fringes, just completely an outcast at the moment, that needs a loan to get some minutes. I think the thing that I'd give hope to Tomori in the long term is Thiago Silva's not going to be a long-term signing at Chelsea, and Chelsea need to find the answer beyond Thiago Silva in that centre-back position.
Yeah, and it's right. I'm interested to see, because that's the one area I think Chelsea need a sort of quality player. Like you said, Thiago is good, but he's not here for the long term. I like Zuma, but he strikes me as a defender where he needs someone like Thiago, someone who can kind of coach him through a game. He's a good defender, but I'd describe him as reactive, sort of thing. Christensen, at 1 minute his stock was high at Chelsea, seems to be off, and I think Rudiger's future, what happens with Rudiger could probably make things difficult for Tomori, because surely, unless you bring one centre half in January, Rudiger won't be allowed to leave and Tomori going out on loan. So one of them's got a decision to make. Speaking of Rudiger, there's a question here. Thank you for your question, Ched. He said, well, it's better for you, better yet. He said, Dan, can you see Rudiger and or Christensen staying in the Prem like Barkley and Willian? Hopefully it's not at Arsenal, because we need a centre half.
I feel probably more likely Rudiger stays in the Prem than Christensen. I just don't think Christensen suits the Premier League. I think he's had enough chances at Chelsea. The weird thing about Christensen is Matt Law, who's really well tied up at Chelsea, like in terms of knowing about transfers. Apparently Chelsea fear about letting Christensen go because they worry it's going to be a Kevin De Bruyne situation again, where we let a young player go and he turns into a world beater. I don't think that's going to happen with Christensen. I've seen enough. It's not like the De Bruyne situation at all. You know, De Bruyne only got a couple minutes for Mourinho and then he was off. Christensen has had a significant amount of time, I think, at Chelsea now. He's never been a first team player, but there's a reason for that, because he's never been assured. I think this is the thing I say as the harsh thing I can say about Christensen, and I've said it before, so I'll say it now. He reminds me of sort of a bad Arsenal defender, in a sense that I think he could actually fit in at Arsenal if your style of play goes in possession again. I think he's he's a good passer, but the moment the game gets physical, the moment we come up against, say, a Sheffield United or a Burnley, I think Christensen can be beat quite easily. And I think, I'm sure you'd pick out a number of your defenders at the moment that have that issue, especially in the past with Wenger. And I think that that's the issue Christensen has. I think that a lot of people rate Christensen because of that passing ability, but for me, there's so much more. And he's just not a vocal presence on the pitch. There's nothing about Christensen that is dominating, assuring. Like you never feel his presence. And for me, whatever centre back you are, whether you're a better passer, whether you're bit more elegant on the ball, you have to have a presence. Like I don't think that's sort of a stereotypical English thing to say about centre backs. I think that's just what you need, right? You need that, and Christensen just doesn't offer that. So I think he'd likely go back to the Bundesliga maybe. He had a really good time at Mönchengladbach. I think maybe that'd be a good move for him. He settled really well there. Could go to the Liga. I think that's a perfect move for him. And I don't think Chelsea should fear about letting him go, because I think he just doesn't suit what we're doing.
I know it's a bit irrelevant for the sake of it, but we're speaking about young players, and it's a selfish question. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, feelings?
I'm a massive fan of Ruben. He's one of my favorite. Well, I'd say obviously he's out on loan at the moment, but he was one of my favorite players in the Chelsea squad. I loved watching him play under Sarri. Another young player that just suffered with a terrible injury at the worst time, because it was a very short period of time, but under Sarri at the back end of that year, he was turning into our best player. He really was. He was fulfilling everything we'd hoped from that midfield role. I think it's a big year for him just getting on the pitch and playing football, but he isn't, I don't watch tons of Fulham when I can, obviously, you as having a YouTube channel, you focus predominantly on Chelsea. He seems to be on the bench a lot for Fulham. And I watched him against Everton, where he came off the bench and had an impact, won a penalty and scored a goal as well. And I just wonder, I know Fulham have turned the corner a little bit. I'd like to see him start there a little bit more, because he's got such ability, he really has. I mean, I've wrote articles about Ruben Loftus-Cheek that people can go and read, sort of fawning over him and saying how big of a future I think he can have. I just think the issue is timing once again. And my fear is the amount of midfielders Chelsea have. Like, we've just invested a lot of money on Kai Havertz. That's a long-term signing. And you wonder with Mason as well, being a young player in Chelsea's midfield. We've got the likes of Conor Gallagher out on loan. It's tough to see. It's tough to see him come back, right? And I do fear that Ruben, if he gets his injury issues behind him and he was to leave Chelsea, I think he can have a big future somewhere, because I think if he finds form, I think he's a very difficult midfielder to stop, in my opinion. I think the best I've seen of him, he's got everything you'd want in a modern game. I love Ruben, but I just fear it's maybe the time has passed for him at Chelsea, which is such a shame.
Yeah, I was going to say that you kind of answered that. You kind of feel it's last chance saloon and that he needs to get his career on track. Like you said, it wouldn't surprise me if he went off somewhere, finally finds another home, gets clear of his injuries and becomes a real decent player. What's going on with first and foremost Werner? Because I thought out of all your signings, I thought Werner was a sure bet to score goals. He looks in a healthy way, someone who lives and breathes goals. I think his link-up play is good. And I think his mentality is there. But I just feel in the last, I say couple, it's been a while. It seems like he's focusing on trying to get that goal too much. He's clearly not on confidence. Like even against West Ham, it was bordering on laughable. It's written in the stars literally for him not to score. What's your feelings on him and where you lot are at with him?
Yeah, I think he's been helped by the fact that we've got goals from other areas. People who watched him at Leipzig said this. Werner does miss a lot of chances naturally. That's what he did before. I think a lot of people at a distance watch goal compilations on YouTube, and probably those goal compilations are not going to include all the big misses. Werner's a player that naturally in his career has missed a lot of chances, but he gets a lot of chances. And we've seen it at Chelsea, right? He's just lacking confidence in front of goal. The thing that gives me hope about Werner is the amount of places he's getting into in the pitch. I think that and good positions he gets into naturally, I think, and I'm sure an Arsenal fan won't want to hear this, I think sooner rather than later he's going to put some of these in the back of the net.
Wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't against us.
Well, it's the thing is he puts himself in so many good positions that you think that goal will come. I think generally the thing you want from a striker, to me, if you're not going to score goals or if you're struggling, the other night, he missed a chance in the first half, and you could fear that, and I've seen this with Chelsea strikers before, with like Morata, for instance, where head goes down, they're done for the game. There's almost no point having them on the pitch anymore because they're not going to do anything else. The thing about Werner is he doesn't put his head down. I see a player still making those runs, still putting himself in a position to miss. He's not hiding away from those chances, which makes me think that he's just in a really bad run of form in front of goal, rather than him being like mentally just fried and everything in his game is just, gone at this point. I think that's not a massive concern for me. I think those goals will come. I actually think that having Tammy Abraham in the team massively helps Werner because of the way Tammy moves. He's got a lot more mobility to Giroud, and I think he naturally opens up space for Timo to make runs into that sort of inside left position, which is where he got most of his goals for RB Leipzig. So I'm not massively concerned because Chelsea this year, we've got a number of goal scorers and a number of places we can get goals from. Last year, that wasn't the case. And I just think another player that just give him time, I think he will come good. I think he'll find the goals. And I think once it's such a cliche, once he gets one, I think he'll get a few once again. I think he just needs a bit like Tammy Abraham the other night. He needs something to go his way, like a scuff shot finds its way into Timo Werner right in front of the goal, and he just needs to tap it in. Something like that, hopefully. And I think once he gets one, he'll be firing.
What are you making of Giroud? Because it is the Giroud derby. I feel Giroud, like at Arsenal, has been an underappreciated player to a degree, in the sense of, I do think Chelsea fans like the goals he's coming with. I think it's different because Chelsea clearly is not Lampard's cup of tea. Clearly, he's gone into Chelsea not being first choice. I think Arsenal's biggest problem was we was making someone who's a squad striker and underappreciated in that aspect, someone who you're looking at to get 20 league goals. And one thing I've loved about Giroud, I think people look at him with rose tints. His highlights reel is going to look amazing. He's been a great player, World Cup winner, scored a whole heap of goals. But I just feel people look at his overall play with rose tints. I feel he's one of them. When he's good, he's good. He's good with, I mean, the Chelsea players must love him because he's a small guy. He's a tall guy with short players. His skill set is not to run in behind. He wants to do 1-2s, which means you have more of the ball. And you've seen that at France. Clearly, Lampard doesn't want to play that way. In an ideal world, I don't think he wants to use Giroud. But one thing Giroud's always had is he's responded very well to adversity. And, at the moment, he's scoring a lot of goals. I'm sure I'd say Tammy's probably your first choice at this moment. But last season, I think he was harshly done by. He scored a lot of goals and went through a blip. And you've obviously got Werner, who in an ideal world's the marquee. So with Giroud in consideration and Tammy, what's going on in terms of the strikers and what's the sort of thing there?
I think it's a good problem that Frank has at the moment. He has two strikers that offer him a slightly different way of playing. I think people look at the size of Giroud and Tammy and think they're similar. I think they're very different in what they give you. Tammy's a great player to press from the front. He's able to move in and out of positions. He's able to drift a little bit wide if Werner can then drift centrally, especially if Pulisic's playing. Pulisic is a player that loves to drift into central areas. That's where he can be really dangerous. And I think Tammy allows that to happen. If you want a bit more of a pacey attack, and you want an attack that maybe can sit back a little bit and hit on the counter a bit more, I think Tammy Germain, as was seen at the Emirates last season. I think with Giroud, I've been amazed with him at Chelsea. I think, it's almost like he's getting better with age, and he's been able to respond really well. I mean, the story last year where he was basically out the door, it felt like at the end of January, responded, got back into the team, and that final stretch of the season, no Chelsea fan will ever forget that, because he scoring goals regularly, the first choice striker. He basically helped us get Champions League football, secure it in some really difficult moments, and with a team that was struggling defensively. I don't know. I think it's a good problem to have. Actually, I don't look at it as an issue. I think you've got to give absolute credit to the professional that Giroud is. That he manages to. Like, he'll be third choice, and you think there's no chance of him getting back in the team, and then he'll get 1 or 2 games, and then he'll prove to you why he should be in the team. I think as Chelsea fans and in previous years, we've struggled in striking options in so much as we maybe have one main one that you go, okay, he's going to get the goals, but then behind that, you don't really have much trust.
Not much to it.
This year we have that. We have a player that, if Tammy's not firing, you bring Giroud in. It depends on the type of game actually as well. I wonder how Frankie's going to approach Arsenal, because Arsenal, I'm not quite sure what you're going to get from Arsenal at the moment, and I'm maybe it's a bit like you. I don't know if you can give me some insight on what to expect from Arsenal, because the problem is I've watched a lot of Arsenal recently, as I think a lot of people have, just being fascinated by what's going on. And sometimes I see a team that maybe wants to be on the front foot, maybe wants to press a little bit, but then also wants to sit back and have a low block, but then wants to get, it's hard to know. And I think it's hard to approach a game like that, because if you see Arsenal as a more defensive team that's going to sit back, you'd want to go with Giroud, a player that you can play off and is going to be in the box, potentially getting crosses, because Arsenal struggle defending crosses. But then I also think, can we hit this team on the break? And, Tammy Abraham is going to be in confidence.
That's the thing, that's the thing. I hear you about that, but I don't think it makes a difference. If you go with Giroud, you give a physical handful, which our strikers have a problem with. If you go with Tammy, which, like you saw yesterday, he'll hang on the last shoulder in similar fashion to Gab Jesus yesterday. Crosses is a given, it is a given, and that's what's concerned me, and was what I was annoyed about, because going into this fixture list, with Southampton, with Burnley, with you lot and City, I wanted to see an improvement in set pieces, or our approach to that, because that's my biggest peeve. They've all got teams that will exploit you. Fair enough, we scored an own goal against Burnley, but the marking was atrocious. Everton, similar case. And obviously yesterday we let ourselves down from a set piece. Now, yesterday players were rotated, but that's the same theme. I think Chelsea, the best form of Chelsea is to come and be open. That's probably ironically where Arsenal have the biggest chance, but you'll hit us on the transition. We'll do that underdog thing like we did against you lot in the FA Cup, where we'll probably sit back and things. But I think that's the greatest danger. It's almost a catch-22, because like I said, you look at the transition last night, you look at it against Spurs in particular. These are things that should give you confidence. It's almost cliche to say because of your midfielders, but I think it's one in midfield. You look at someone like Kante, most interceptions. You've obviously got quality in and around him. Obviously, Zuma is a defender, but statistically, he's had the most up there for most passes. So he's central to playing out from the back. Thiago needs no introduction, and we don't press together. Like you saw yesterday, there's no point pressing if one person wants to press, the left back wants to press, but the midfielders want to sit back. There's too many gaps. So I'm not going to discredit Chelsea, but I just feel the last couple of times we've played them, they've just simply done what most teams done and exploited our stupid mistakes. The one time we didn't do it was in the FA Cup, arguably. I think we let ourselves down at the bridge. Stupid mistakes, with all due respect to your quality. And I think definitely when we played you lot this time a year ago, last 15 minutes messed up. I think it's won or lost in the midfield, and I think ultimately we'll lose that midfield battle. But hope, man, hope.
Yeah, I think Aubameyang, if he's, I don't know his fitness for this game. I think if he's not in the starting 11, I think I feel a lot more hope for the game, especially if Arsenal try and sit back, because the thing last year in the FA Cup, this year in the FA Cup final, was it was much dependent on, Aubameyang getting those goals on a break, right? And having his pace and having his vision and being able to just almost score goals by himself, that winning goal, despite it being, another showcase of Chelsea allowing their centre-backs to be exposed very easily, which is something we've improved on this year. If you don't have Aubameyang up there, I think that it's, Chelsea have a better chance in terms of really if we are in possession and you're not pressing Thiago Silva, I think that's a big issue. Thiago has his passing, his long passing from deep has been a big thing for Chelsea this year. Switches of play. If you allow Mason time, not just from corners. If Mason can get into the game and you allow him to switch play pretty regularly, I think that's another area that Chelsea find real success from. I think width is such a big part of the way Chelsea attack, and we're going to be limited without Reece James and Hakim Ziyech, but still I look at Pulisic as, for me, this is the danger man, I think, going into this game, that Arsenal have to try and shut down. I think you'll know that from the FA Cup final. If he didn't get injured, I had a lot more faith that Chelsea could win that game, because he just, at the back end of last season, he was incredible. He's had some injury issues, but he's coming back into form now. And he's one player that I look at, and I think, especially against what looks like a pretty frail Arsenal team at the moment, things could radically change on Saturday. It's one player to me that I think could definitely hurt Arsenal's defence. If the likes of Rob Holding is playing, I want to see Pulisic running up against him. And that's just, I think, something Lampard should be focusing on.
For me, it's the midfield battle, because we're almost crippled because we've got injuries, and with the players that aren't fit simply aren't good enough. So I'd probably look to mirror something along the lines of what we did against City. Saying that, though, I do think, as good as you lot have been defensively generally this season, and there's been an improvement, your last couple of games doesn't suggest too many clean sheets. And I do think, as you said, Chelsea give you opportunities. So I don't think we should consider this to a degree like we're playing in Liverpool. I think we've got to find, the key word is balance of when to actually try and when to sit, because I do think there's opportunities there. I do think with someone like Zuma, if you pull him out of position as good as he is, him and Thiago have a point to prove. I think we've lost it in midfield, because I just don't feel we have the one midfielder that I think is quality is Partey, and he's not involved. That forces us to go with a back three, and then we're going to lose that battle because our midfielders don't want it. Ceballos has been nothing short of a flop. El Nene, he's initially came into the team, was playing all right, but this is where my pet peeve with football fans in general is that, especially Arsenal players, is that it's okay to just consider someone's in form, but 9 times out of 10 they'll let you down. I don't mind if you had a one player like El Nene, but when you've got El Nene, Holding, David Luiz, as much as I like Pepe, Lacazette, we've got too many hot and cold players. We've got very few consistent players, and I hope Martinelli's fit, because I think Martinelli's someone that has to play against you lot. I don't know who plays right back in Reece James's absence, but just because of his proactiveness, just because of his energy, I think you go with him. I'm looking to probably go Martinelli on the left, Saka on the right, to be fair, and Lacazette through the middle, if what people in the comments are saying that Aubameyang's injured, because past that I can't see anything. Pepe, just in terms of randomness, could get it, but I just feel Saka and Gabriel are a bit more cerebral and could present problems for you lot than the others.
Yeah, I think it's just surprising to me the amount of players in your squad that, to me, I just don't know how they're still at the club. I just don't know how the likes of Bellerin, who, funny enough, has a pretty decent goal record against Chelsea, to be honest, scored against us last year. But generally, I don't know how he's still at the club. I think there's a bit too much Wenger still in this squad. You haven't been able to...
man.
Yeah, it's like you haven't been able to move on from that. And I think that's the big issue that you're seeing at the moment, where in a similar way, Chelsea had this under Sarri, where it's a bit of an identity crisis and trying to find a vision of where to go next. And I think that's the issue Arsenal have. I'm intrigued to see if Chelsea win this game, what happens with Arteta, because from what I've been reading from other people, it seems that even if he loses this game, it's not going to be defining. But I think that Simon Johnson and Chelsea reporter from The Athletic was reporting that if Chelsea win this game, I think in terms of points, we go above Arsenal in sort of the all-time Premier League record, in sort of showing sort of the shift in power in London over the last 10, 15 years. And I think this is a great opportunity for Chelsea. I think that we can't take this lightly. For me, I think every Chelsea fan will be thinking about the FA Cup final back in August, where, we went into that sort of a fate.
Arsenal turns up, but boy.
And I think that's going to be my fear. It's a game against Arsenal. I'm never going to, despite your struggles recently, I'm always going to think that it's going to be a difficult game. I expect Arsenal to turn up. If they don't turn up, then I think that says a lot about what they think about their manager, because based on where you are at the moment, I think that Chelsea and Lampard are not going to be fooled. I hope are not going to be fooled into thinking this is going to be some sort of walkover, because I don't think it will be. I expect at some point Arsenal are going to turn up and do something. So hopefully Chelsea are ready for that.
It's got to the point as an Arsenal fan, I definitely hope form goes out the window. But for me, it's gone to a thing where I'm talking about self-respect. As much as I want you to play for the club, for the manager, for me as a fan, if you can't play for yourself, you can't do any of that. And it's got to the case of it's a bit too easy at Arsenal. It's like, is it the end of the world when we lose? Of course, it should never be at a club. But when I look at all the other clubs in the Premier League, they're dying to achieve whatever goals they are. To like, you look at the Premier League table from 10th to 1st, there isn't too many points separating it. And so for Arsenal to be out of that completely, it speaks a lot about our team, and it says the caliber. And for me, as much as we can talk about Wenger and stuff like that, I think you've got to go for the owner. You look at Roman Abramovich, say what you want about him and spending money and all of this sort of thing. You never lie down for too much. Like there was a season you lot finished 8th or something like that. Next season after that, it was a positive return because Roman Abramovich, you know, and I like that. You need to find balance. You don't want to manage an owner that's too hands-on for obvious reasons that can go left. But I just like that he will leave people to their devices with the one common objective that you need to achieve excellence. If you're that Marina lady who does a good job with transfers, you need to be the best at your job. Manager, you need to be the best. There's a healthy sense of pressure. Like if you lot were to, let's just say you lot lost 5-0, it's not going to happen. You could genuinely see Roman Abramovich turning up at 9 a.m. at Cobham's asking people what's happened. You don't get that vibe from the Kroenkes. And as much as I feel a lot of these players are here under Wenger, you know, there's been several different managers. They let them down. There's been several different owners. There's been several different people above, like the technical directors, technical staff, different players, different all of this sort of thing. And if the one variable's been the man who owns this club. So until he goes, I don't think you can trickle down a winning mentality. My problem with Arteta is the very few things he can control, he's got it wrong. There's no excuse to be here for a year now, and I'm still talking about a system or a lack of, because you seem to have all the answers last year. He's now only giving me questions. So that's the massive problem. I hear what he's saying about discipline and non-negotiables and all of these sort of things. It all sounds good. It sounds like bullish talk. It makes sense, but it seems like one rule for one player and several others. Willian, there's already a lot of pressure on Willian. You've given him a 3-year deal. You've let him go to Dubai. He's still playing week in, week out. The young players, we don't understand what's happening. You know, if there was one or two like Chelsea where you could say, oh, what's he doing with Callum? What's he doing with this guy? It's all right. They happen. But it's like there's several players. So I'm not going to go as far as to say he's going to lose the dressing room, but I can see how this can turn. I think he's got until Brighton unless things happen. You made a great point in that. What too much is going to change against Chelsea? Because just looking at the two caliber of the clubs that we faced in, you lot and City, and the form we're in, you probably expect to lose that. You're probably just hoping for a sort of performance. So I think it will be Brighton. I think Brighton's the one he's gonna lose. Like you said, I hope form goes out the window, but I don't think these players have any pride. You know, you've finished you've gone into the international break with a defeat. You've spoken about wanting to come out of it with a victory. You failed to do that. Every week you talk about a reaction. You haven't done that. If you can't react against Spurs, how can I see you react against Chelsea? You know, it's probably, I hate both of them equally, but you know, we've been down this route. It's the problem with Arsenal. Maybe if we was playing at Wembley, you know, I don't know what happens with us when we play at Wembley, but if we was playing at Wembley, there might be half a chance. But yeah, I just feel we're going to flatter to deceive. We might start a bit more positive. We're going to have possession. Ultimately, 70th minute is where the game's lost against Chelsea. That's where we make our mistakes. We either make mistakes very early, like Mustafi at the bridge, or we let ourselves down in the last few minutes. And for all your criticisms or praise, you're the one team you can't afford to do that. And if you go into a game against Spurs and you know Son down the left is going to cause problems, how can I expect you to learn your lessons with the Chelsea threats you have? So I'll have to see what these guys are saying, man, but I'm not confident at all.
I think the first goal is key in this game, and I know that's a thing you can say about most games. But I think that if Chelsea score early, like in the first 20 minutes, I think as Chelsea, you'd want to see the character of this Arsenal team, and you'd hope that from a Chelsea perspective, you heard from a Chelsea perspective that didn't happen against Man City, but as was the case last night, it was incredible how watching that game how quickly it turned, and I've seen that a few times with Arsenal that even like, you know, sometimes as a fan, and I've had this frustration with Chelsea recently, where you hope the cliche goes that goals change games, right? You think that, you know, your team scores a goal, whether you go in front or whether you equalize, that something has to change in this game. You know, it's the biggest thing you can do in a game is score a goal, you know, and that's surely the momentum of a game should shift. That didn't happen against Everton for you guys.
It's game management against Everton, bro.
It's game management. And I think that the unfortunate thing for Arteta is, you know, there's a lot of talk now about, you know, trust the process. And, you know, Chelsea fans have said similar things about Lampard. I think it's the level of where you're at that's the issue for Arteta. You know, I think a lot of fans, a bit like Chelsea last year, you can accept a year of like Chelsea fans, for instance, we could accept that there were going to be some setbacks because of young players coming into the team who'd never played for Chelsea before in the first team, putting a lot of faith in the likes of Tammy and Mason and Reece James. You can understand that. I think there was a lot of acceptance of that and a transfer ban. I think the issue that Arteta's got is he's underperforming with a lot of senior players, and he's also not well. He's also, I think, I've seen some frustration from Arsenal fans that he isn't putting some other younger players in more consistently, like we spoke about, like Maitland-Niles, for instance. And in terms of the league, when you look at it, I don't think there's a bigger but I don't know how you could argue with this. There's not a bigger underperforming team than Arsenal this year. To be only 2 points,
they're expected to be fighting relegation.
Yeah, 2 points, is it? Something in front of Fulham, considering that opening game against Fulham.
November, or
I think it's I think that's the issue for Arteta. And despite, I've seen people saying, why not back Arteta the full way? And I think that the board does. It's a bit like Chelsea in the past, right? The board needs to take responsibility, like at any football club. But it gets to a point where you're like, you can't trust the process when you're near the relegation zone and you're losing games. There's a point of no return, right? You can't sack the whole squad, despite the fact that a lot of fans want to.
It's like getting on a bus. You don't like. I have no problems trusting the process. I have no problem provided you're showing it to me. You don't get, if I know I need to go to Oxford Street, I'm not just going to jump on a random bus and expect it to turn up there. It doesn't make sense. I don't know the journey we're going on to, and that's why all we need as fans is hope. Because fans, I'm not going to say fans will accept losing and being where we are, but if you were playing the young players, if there was a system, we could say, all right, cool, we'll grin and bet our teeth. Bite our teeth, there's better days to come. When you can't see a system, when a single player isn't really excelling, when it's actually your young and experienced players, like where was Saka and Martinelli 2 years ago? Where was Tierney slightly older? But we're speaking about Tierney being captain in a healthy sense. I love that. He's a great player. But why is it a man and Celtic's also a big club, but why is it a man that's been here for 2 seconds? He is showing me more so what I want to see than players that have come through this academy via Barcelona, or players that have been captains of club and country and made the same old mistakes. I just feel there's a structural problem. And again, when you look at Arteta, there's no pressure at this club, and he seems inexperienced, left to his own devices. Now, that's not an issue if we was actually going to mask him with experience. You've got Edu, who's new to his role. You've got Vinay, who's new to his role. So you've got 3 people essentially just on work experience, and you've got no one around them. You've got absent owner, who seems out of sight, out of mind. It's just a negative cocktail, and you just can't see how it gets better. And that's why I don't think it's as basic as saying you just sack Arteta, it gets better, or you can just blame the Kroenke. Because for me, the buck stops with the owners. You get rid of the owners, and owners that want to be winners, sooner or later you will be a winner. It's facts. But we've mismanaged money. It's like we're not buying players to fit into a system. I'm not going to sit here and say I was unhappy about the signing of Pepe, but anyone that can do basic research, you can only see one really outstanding season. Why have you allowed yourself to be in a position where rising all the fees is 72 million? You spent 30, 40 on Xhaka. We're still talking about what midfielder he is. 35 on Mustafi. 3 expensive free transfers in Kolasinac, Mkhitaryan and Willian. You take shortcuts, yet you end up having to take the long road. And that comes down to it not being proactive. Ultimately, as a football club, we're reactive. And I look at things like this, did Emre or Wenger necessarily get sacked for footballing purposes, or was it bums on seats? Was we excited that we beat you lot in the FA Cup final because it's bragging rights, because it's a trophy, or is it because there's Europe and we weren't getting Europe? And you can see our Arsenal only have pennies to work with now, how much of an issue that is. And even this season, I'm not going to say it's a benefit, because I never want my team to finish lower, but they're going to feel it in their purse strings, because you're not going to get Europe in any capacity. Even in the Cat Yaraba, I think there's now a competition below the Europa League, so you'll probably be in that. But it's just wasted, man. It's just nonsense.
Something I've been thinking about recently is certain players who've left Arsenal, who struggled at Arsenal, who are now doing better. I look at a player like, for instance, I was watching the other day for Southampton, Theo Walcott. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Arsenal need Theo Walcott in the first team. Like, obviously, he's an older player now, struggled at Arsenal, had his injury problems. But I look at Oxlade-Chamberlain, I look at Aaron Ramsey. I think there's a real safety net at Arsenal that's been a culture of just accepting that, you don't have to be the best player. You can have days where you go away to Chelsea and lose 6-0 and, but you'll be here the next week. And I think that that's something that, despite sometimes my frustration with Chelsea's sort of lack of patience with things, in the other sense, and hopefully I see a little bit more of that with Chelsea moving forward under Lampard, and a little bit of a long-term vision. Because it's like, when I hear Arsenal fans complain, they bring up Chelsea and they say, look how many managers Chelsea had. I think that at the same time, we've struggled with that recently because we haven't won a Premier League since 2017. We've had Conte and Sarri, and there is pitfalls to that. I think a lot of people will sell you the idea that just switching managers year in, year out is going to give you success. It's not that simple. And every club's culture is very different. The way a Chelsea fan looks at football is very different to the way an Arsenal fan looks at football. And it's the same the way the two clubs go about their business. So I think it's, for me, just, and I can only speak as someone from an outside perspective as a rival. I just think that whether you stick with Arteta or not, I think it's a little bit the issue they have at Man United. What's the direction moving forward? Are you going to stick to a possession-based style of play? Are you going to try and integrate young players? Are you wanting to become more like the Harlem Globetrotters, where you bring in big, expensive signings, and that's the way you go? You're going to spend massive amounts of money, a bit like Man United, right? I just don't know what Arsenal are trying to be at the moment. And I think Arteta said a lot of things about culture. Culture is a great buzzword in the modern game. We all talk about it, right? But what does that actually mean? I think a lot of people got sold down the river a bit with Arteta, because I think he said a lot of things. And I heard a lot of people at the start of the year big up Arteta over the likes of Lampard and Solskjaer, claiming that he'd somehow fixed Arsenal. And I think that I always felt myself, I didn't think it was going to be this bad, but I always felt long way to go. And I think this is the problem with, I think, modern football. There's a lack of nuance. There's a lack of sort of understanding of, balance. Things can change very quickly in football, can't they? And, in 2 months' time, in a couple of days' time, I could feel really negative about Chelsea if we lose against Arsenal, or I could feel really, really positive. So I think that there's a lot of things that I think Arsenal, my problem with Arsenal, I think they talk a big game a lot of the time. And I think there's a lot of talk in PR about how great they're doing.
Lip service
to the media. And a lot of stuff Chelsea do is behind the scenes. A lot of what we do is quite in secret, to be honest. It's quite hard to know what Roman's thinking. A lot of people try and guess what he's thinking. A lot of people don't know what he's thinking. You just have to go by his actions. So I think that's the issue, right? And I don't know. I can't see Arteta lasting that long, to be honest. I think it just gets to a point where you have to chop, almost like chop off the arm, basically. I think that it's slowly dragging down that team, and I think it could reach a point of no return. I think saying that he could survive to Brighton, I think if Chelsea were to absolutely thump Arsenal on Saturday, it's 3-4-0.
Thing is, I don't even think he'd be gone then. I don't.
Really? You don't like Chelsea coming to the Emirates, and absolutely smashing Arsenal, not just a 1 or 2-0 win, like a tight win.
5, then yeah, but I think even then at 5 there'll be speculation, it'll be looming. But I don't think we'd wake up the next day and see yellow bar, because I don't think this club are looking at it like that. And the axe falls with the manager. Like I said, my biggest gripe with Arteta is the very small things he can control. He hasn't maximized it. Yeah. But the problems go deeper than that. As you said, you can't just do this sack and manager thing. There needs to be a plan. There's no mandate at Arsenal. You'd like to get top 4. You'd hope you'd get top 4. There's no active push. And one thing I'll give Arteta is he did give lip service, but sometimes I do think he tells us the truth. And he was big on the culture talk, and I agree with him. One man can't change this. It's Arsenal fans, we do it. We look to one man to be the Messiah. We looked at Emery. We're now looking at Arteta. We look at Gabriel on the football field, or Saka. Until we collectively move, like it's become a running joke for me on my channel. Whether we win or lose, I'm still talking about Tierney, Gabriel, Bukayo Saka, Martinelli if he's got minutes, the same old names. And anytime you've got only 3 players that are up for it out of a starting 11, at a push maybe 6 out of a 25-man squad, you're in problems. And I just feel, Arteta needs to probably keep it moving, because he's not showing me anything. But I'd rather give him an opportunity with new players. And then, like you said, you can't sack 11 players. But I'd rather see him under a few good eggs than actually these players under a new manager, because they keep doing it. And that's the annoying thing for me. They said they loved Wenger, didn't show it on a football field. You said Emery's telling you everything you need to do, and it was great for a sec, and then you started blaming him. You're doing it under Arteta as well. So I think a lot of these players are rotten eggs. And where we've put ourselves in a problem is we've got poor players on extremely high wages and lengthy contracts. So we're in a bit of problems. It's like I want Xhaka to go in January, but as crazy as that is that the smartest? Because we're light in midfield. I think and this is where I get at the owner. We haven't had I'm not saying Partey is Patrick Vieira, but we haven't sought to get that presence since that man left the club. Any other club brings him in very early. We didn't do that. There was talk of Aouar, and I would have loved Aouar, but again, he's not the only midfielder in the world. If we are Arsenal and we do not have money, go and find a player of a lesser profile. So it doesn't make any sense, really and truly. It's crazy. But at the same time, we're getting to the end of this. I want to ask you a quick question to wrap this up. What would you say? Give me a score prediction.
I think I'll go for a 2-0. I think, clean sheets in this Chelsea team at the moment and there's a cat going to come across the screen right now because just invaded my screen. Let me put the cat down.
Big up the cat, man.
2-0. Big up the cat. 2-1, 2-0, 2-1, I think. I think if Aubameyang's not playing, I think that's a massive thing for Chelsea. I just want to get clean sheets again. I think we've gone for a few weeks where we haven't kept clean sheets, and that was such a big part of our sort of improvement defensively this year. So, listen, anyone at Arsenal, 1-0, 2-0. I'm not arrogant enough to think we're going to turn up and win 4-1 or 5-1. I think that could happen, right? In a scenario, you get a player sent off and the game turns. But I think any sort of Chelsea fan going into this game, just respectfully, like arrogance-wise, I think anyone turning up thinking this is going to be sort of a 4-0, I think you're asking yourself to, for us to lose this game, basically. I just, that's not the way I sort of approach games. I think that there's an issue for me going into this game of knowing what to expect from Arsenal, just in terms of the way Lampard approaches it tactically, whether we press from the front, whether we go a little bit more defensive, sit on the break. I'd maybe like to see that a bit more because I think this Arsenal team struggles to create in possession. And I think that as we saw the other night against West Ham, Chelsea sort of soaked up a bit of pressure and really hit on the counter. And I wonder if that's the way Frank will go, because I think he was really irritated by the way we let it slip against Arsenal back in the FA Cup final, because we started that game on fire, but the issue was last season we couldn't maintain it. So any win is going to make my day, because I think winning at Arsenal is always one of the biggest wins of the season, despite what the struggles you've had this year.
If I was Chelsea, I'd personally be on the front foot, look to scare them, look to do what City have. But I look at when we lost to you guys in the second half, you just picked apart our stupid mistakes. I look at the defeat we had to Leicester and Spurs in the sense of, I wouldn't say these teams sat back, but they stayed in possession. They somewhat played on Arsenal's sort of lack of confidence, let them build up a spell of possession, let them, start to feel themselves. Players start to get confident and go forward. And then mainly the Spurs game, just pick apart them. And you have the players to do it. Like, with all due respect to Kante, he can pass and fall. The midfielders can cut us open in 2 passes. You don't have the luxury of Thiago. Zuma's no slouch on the ball, but you've got Thiago Silva. You can skip out your midfield and find a runner. I'm very scared of 2v1 situations, which is, in theory, I'd like to go with a back 3, because you've mentioned Pulisic. Callum Hudson-Odoi might not be flavour of the month, but he's a problem. And you've got a number of options you can play with. I can't see anything other than a Giroud goal, because I just think 2020 has been a crazy year, and that's it. A Wobie assist, Theo Walcott goal against us. It would only make sense if Giroud scored. So my brain is telling me 3-1, 4-1 Chelsea, similar to what we saw yesterday. My heart is just hoping for a dirty 1-0 victory, just win 3 points, and we'll probably go and lose to Brighton, man. So we'll have to see, man.
Yeah, my impression, I think it'll be a more tense game or a more cagey game, at least to begin with, than I think I'd expect. At least, something that Arteta did prove earlier in his time at Arsenal was, and especially like Man United way, for instance, where he can set up a team on the break. And I think that's what he'll probably do. I can't expect he's going to really come at Chelsea with the fact that Werner and Pulisic, for instance, on the break, and Tammy, if he's playing. I think, you're just sort of playing as Chelsea's hands doing that. But Chelsea at times have struggled to break down teams. So if it's an off day, then there may be a chance. But as I say, I think Aubameyang for me is a big player. I think if he plays, then you've got, Arsenal's chances of getting something, even though he struggled, I think go up.
And that's my problem with Arsenal, is that when I look at Liverpool now, for obvious reasons, Liverpool and Arsenal are miles apart, and for obvious reasons. But when I look at them, and that's what I call a squad. I know that their squad is more or less the same 11, and they've done well to keep them fit, but they've had a lot of injuries, and you haven't seen too much of a drop off, and you've seen desire. I don't want my players to go in there and say, "Oh, we've got no Partey, there's no Aubameyang, we're resigned to defeat." I want them to use that as an advantage. Can you? Is there any complacency potentially in that Chelsea team, because you're not seeing Aubameyang and underperforming Aubameyang at that? So I want to see something. And for me, I just think Eddie Nketiah is going to start. I'm quite frustrated in that. If he scores, he's my best friend, of course. But I just feel the lineup you saw yesterday, it kind of told us what's going to happen. We're going to see Holding, David Luiz, Tierney's going to be there. If Aubameyang's fit, he will be there. But I can see Eddie, and I know Eddie was a former Chelsea academy product, and you've always got the bit between your teeth. But for me, it's a boy against men. With all due respect, Zuma's a powerhouse. Thiago Silva's a powerhouse. And I want Arteta to learn his lesson because, you know, Eddie played poorly against Southampton. He played even worse against Everton. And for me, I judge strikers on what you do when you're not scoring. At the very least, be a nuisance. I'm seeing Michael Keane trying to score from 30 yards. Yerry Mina was trying to do the same, obviously, before he scored. So it's all on the players to fix up and stop feeling sorry for themselves and rise to the occasion. But it's also on the system. And I would like us to go with a back three, but I would like us to be braver. Now, many people don't understand that because they don't understand you can play five at the back as long as your prerogative in a team is to go forward. It doesn't really matter. And we don't have that. And I don't think too much is going to change. So I just think we're just going to have to be very reactive, see if we can counter-attack Chelsea, and that's it. But I can't see anything other than a loss for us, man. It's quite poor in that regards, man. But I've appreciated having you here, my guy, man. Let them know where they can find you once again, man.
Yeah, just Son of Chelsea on YouTube. Search all one, like as you can see on the screen now, like that, Son of Chelsea, and you'll find my channel. Also, Son of Chelsea on Twitter, Son of Chelsea on Instagram, daily Chelsea videos. I've got some videos coming up. Obviously, I've got my preview for the Arsenal game coming out tomorrow, which is like my team selector. So I do previews a little bit differently, where I will talk about Arsenal, I'll talk about the opposition at the time, and I'll speak about team news, and then I'll go into my lineup for a game and really focusing on that. So that's sort of the way I preview games. And then I've got my rational perspective, which is my review that comes out straight after the game. So yeah, that's where people can find me.
Yeah, so check out his content. Clearly, you can see he's doing a lot of good content in the build up to this game and beyond that. Get him to 20,000 subscribers, and I'm sure I'll be on his channel, and he's always welcome to be on my channel when he likes, man. Dan, I've appreciated it.
Thank you, man.
A good one.
Thanks for having me on. Absolute pleasure.
Peace out, man. Take care.